All right, so I'm going to get started. The title of this talk is called Weaponized Transparency. And what we're finding is that all transparency can be weaponized. All transparency can be weaponized in every case. We're going to be specifically talking about Congress today, and I'm going to tell you some very vivid stories about how this weaponization takes place. But I'm going to just jam in a little bit of data right away, and then we're going to get into sort of more of a story thing, and then I'm going to hope to open it up to questions pretty early because it takes a while to wrap your head around what we're doing. So the title of our paper is How All Accountability Overwhelmingly Benefits Those Already in Power. All accountability in Congress benefits those in power. So think the wealthy, think big oil, think any powerful group you can imagine, and how transparency destroys the legislative process. We're not saying disturbs the legislative process. We're saying destroys it. So here's a little bit of background. From 1789 to 1970, this is what your committee looked like. Committees often have an odd number of people, usually 11, but they can be up to 30s and 40s. The most important thing to note here is that the committee is in a closed room. Okay, so no one else is in these rooms. So from the Constitution to Kennedy to LBJ, Bill of Rights, Civil Rights Act, these are all things that were drafted and constructed in closed, ultra-secret committees. We don't know a single vote that Kennedy made on a single amendment in committee. Kennedy. We don't know a single thing that he said. He worked in closed rooms. President, the executive branch, sorry, can't get in. Other congressmen can't get in. Okay? So this is where the lobbyists were from 1789 to 1970, which is why they're called lobbyists, because they are in the lobby. We kind of forget what that means nowadays because the lobbyists are now here. Okay, so they've moved in, and notice there's even a numerical change. In the old days, there were lobbyists. People complained about the lobbyists. You'd walk out of the committee and they'd harass you. And then they multiplied and moved in at the same time. This is what today's committees look like. Right, we don't have photos of the old ones, right? Because we're not allowed in. But today's committees, you can go watch the video reproduction of them. This is I believe, a Senate committee, and anyone is allowed in if they can get a spot in line. Okay, so
this is a graph of roll call voting 1953 to present. And what we're going to see is where the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1970 caused this enormous increase of transparent voting. Transparent voting is when a member's name is attached to their vote.
So this doesn't go back all the way. So here's 1953. Back to 1789, there were about 200 votes a year. So if you saw the Lincoln movie, that's a public vote, right? If you see they're going, you know, Ed B. Asner of Baltimore, how do you vote? I vote yay. And if you see the movie, there's a lot of pressure put on these people, even during the vote. Right? They're very terrified to vote. But there were about 200 roll call votes per session. And actually what's interesting is on that very day when you have the Lincoln movie, there were 5 other public roll call votes that day. They made it seem like it was the only thing that mattered that day. There were 5 other votes that day. So there were 200 per session, so about 100 per year. And then they started talking about opening up the votes in Congress. So Kennedy hears about this in 63 or something, just a little bit before he dies, and he's like, it's ridiculous. Don't open up the votes. We're going to get pressured by everybody. And in his case, he was very worried about pressure by the constituents, sort of the mob aspect of democracy. And so they opened up a little bit, and then they passed the law that we're going to be talking about. And then roll call voting shoots up like a rocket ship. So we get up to, 1,600 per session, so about 800 per year. This number's not even accurate. This number's only the ones that are actually fully recorded and put online right now. But in every single committee that they've opened up all the votes. We're talking thousands and thousands more. Right? So your congressman each year is voting thousands of times, and all of it is now public. In 78, they ran into some problems. There was way too much voting going on. No one was able to do anything. And they passed these things that you're aware of, called closed rules, special rules. The increase of closed rules and special rules and sort of new procedures brought it back some. Wasn't able to get it all the way down, and it's been rising ever since. So the numbers of roll call votes have risen substantially. Roll call, again, being when they attach your name to the vote. Okay, so Kennedy voted yes on this bill or this amendment. So an interesting thing is lobbying also rose exactly at that time. So they were writing about the problem with lobbying in 1965. They were, right? And the DuPonts are doing everything the Koch brothers are doing now in 38. And Koch brothers' father is here, and he's going crazy. He's funding everybody he can. Funded Goldwater. How do you do with that? Not so good. Did all the things that we think really work now, and they're not getting very far with this. But we see the rise in lobbying. Lobbying, of course, this goes to 2015. You know, these numbers are astronomical. Partisanship. So partisanship is when the people on the right and the people on the left don't get along. Partisanship skyrockets. We see this in every single committee. When you open the committee to the public, people hardline. People on the left stay on the left. People on the right stay on the right. We've heard this from legislative directors. We've heard it from Jane Mansbridge, looks at this over at Harvard. Every piece of evidence that we have is whenever things are transparent, whenever there's cameras on, people hold their positions. As soon as you close the doors, people negotiate. So the people that you think are hardliners on all those things, the issues that you hate, they're actually softer. But the people that you think are hardliners for all the things you love, too, are a little bit softer. And there's sort of this middle ground. And partisanship turns out to be very dangerous, right? Because if you know exactly how someone's going to vote when they get elected, that raises the stakes of every election. So if this person is definitely going to hurt your business or come after you when they get elected, well, I need to fund a campaign to get them out of it. And so you have a lot of fear based on partisanship. And you don't know how people are voting. There's a lot of people working around the middle. It's a lot less danger with someone from the right winning the election versus someone from the left if you're on the left, and vice versa. So partisanship's a real problem. I just spoke about this, it raises the stakes. This is the modern day version of reaching across the aisle. We saw the exact opposite in the early 70s. Right? So it was very hard to pin down someone on how they vote. Anytime you predicted a vote, you were wrong. Congressional campaign finance shoots up from the 70s as well. This graph goes through 93, 94. You can all imagine where this goes now. I don't know if there's enough space on the screen, but it does go. And this is the one that I care about the most. America has become exceptional. America's exceptionalism right now is with income inequality and wealth inequality. Okay, so the difference between the very rich and the very poor has risen dramatically. Again, this chart only goes to 2003. It's been going up ever since. We're now at the worst point in American history. So we like to think that the robber barons back here, who were so wealthy and the poor were so poor, we've passed that recently. This has gone up, interestingly, through every single president. So went straight up through Obama, went straight up through Clinton, went straight up through the Bush brothers, the Bush family, etc. But what you'll see here is this is France. So anybody who goes, oh, well, technology's changed that, or globalization's changed that, why didn't it change it in France or other countries? Most of Europe follows the less inequality pattern. We're unique in that. And inequality is such a big problem that people claim that it was a driving force both behind the election of Obama and our current president. So here's a quote from 1971. This is one of my favorite quotes on this whole topic. And this gives you a whole different picture of how life is under a Congress that has very little partisanship, where inequality is low, where they're able to take on corporate interests. This is, Lewis Powell became a Supreme Court justice in 72. So he was writing in 71. He was a big lawyer for the tobacco industry. He was very big into corporations being able to push around and get their way in DC. They were failing in 71. And they've been failing for many years. Business has been the favorite whipping boy of many politicians for many years. Current examples of the impotency of business and the near contempt for which businessmen's views are held are the stampedes by politicians to support almost any legislation related to consumers or to the environment. The consumers are the little people. And you look at the data, and this is there. We are passing the EPA, July 1970. We are passing some of the most powerful things to protect consumers. No banks are failing. None. They haven't been failing for 40 years. Something happened. Okay, so you already probably know my POV, which is that transparency is actually one of the root causes of these problems. And these are the pillars, these are the arguments we always hear about transparency. This is what transparency delivers. And if there's something not up here, please raise your hand because I want to add it to this list. Transparency allows constituents to follow Congress. The idea is that we'd be able to suss out any sort of corruption, because all of us, 320 million people, will be able to look at every piece of legislation and someone's going to find the problem in there. Constituents can now, once they find this problem, will be able to hold the members accountable. Okay, so that's great, right? We found this problem, transparency gave us that, we can look in and see every meeting, and now we can take that politician out. And then transparency legitimizes the process. Okay, so these are the three arguments. If there's another good argument for transparency, I'd like to know. So my view is if I've got to fight transparency, I've got to take out at least one of these pillars. What I'm hoping to is start to convince you today that all three are completely wrong. There is no evidence or data support for any of these things actually functioning the way that we've heard now for 50 years. My 5 arguments are as follows. Just under the idea of transparency, I'm going to argue today, I'm going to tell you stories today that are going to try to at least get you started down this path of saying that constituents cannot follow Congress. We already know that it's very difficult, and we know that constituents don't follow Congress. 50% of people don't even know their congressmen's names. So we're talking thousands of votes a year. I haven't met a professor of Congress that knows more than 6 or 7 votes. We know the data says that they don't. I'm going to try and make an argument today that says it's impossible. Okay? Special interests, however, can follow Congress easily. And I'm hoping that in the story that you hear, you will see how easy that is. It is ridiculously easy for special interests. So already we see maybe there's a benefit here to a special interest as opposed to a constituent, if I can pull that argument off. I'm going to argue that constituents cannot hold members accountable. I'm going to argue that special interests can easily hold members accountable. And I'm going to argue that transparency destroys the legislative process. So anytime you see a vote, it's not what the member intended. Or you have to certainly question it. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but there's no legitimacy anymore of the voting. And we're going to see that through a story as well. So it's story time, so I get to walk away from here. I'm going to tell you a couple fun stories. And I want you to imagine something, and a lot of people might have discomfort with this idea at the beginning because of the subject matter. We're going to talk about drones and drone strikes. But I want to imagine that the government's gone crazy, and you are suddenly the victim of a potential drone strike. Okay? I want you to imagine what that's like. Now, the government is deciding to make this drone strike happen. Are you a beneficiary of transparency in these proceedings? So they're going to announce publicly who's going to get hit with the drone strike, where the drone strike might be, and when the launch might be. Does that help you? Well, clearly that would help you, because what are you going to do if you read your address at the time you're home on the transparent thing, and you see on the video, they're covering video of the launch screen, right? We are pressing the button. Well, you're online going, wow, this is great news for me, right? I'm going to walk out and get a coffee right now. Okay? What are you in this specific situation? Well, what's very interesting about this is you are a special interest. So the whole world might have decided that this drone strike was appropriate, but you're a special interest. You don't really like this drone strike, all right? So you're going to jam, you're going to do something. You might try and destroy the legislation, you might try and bribe a legislator, you might try and do a number of sort of things, but you want to avoid this happening. Now I want you to imagine you're not the victim, and you're you, or you're a constituent. And now you've got to look at what the government's got to do to put this drone strike together. So what's one of the first things that you might ask yourself as a constituent if the government's considering doing a drone strike? Are drone strikes even things we want to be doing? So you get this enormous moral question. Is the person we're shooting this drone at or this strike at, are they correctly deserving of this thing? right? You have to think of all these possible infinite questions. Should we have a drone strike program at all? How much are we going to fund that drone strike program with? Should we fund it with 40 billion? Should it be 12 billion? Should it be 50 billion? These are all constituent questions. Is this person at this address? Are we going to be firing potentially at an innocent victim? You know, you could probably come up with millions of questions, right? As a constituent, you don't have any good answers. All right, so you're going to be trying to follow the legislation all along, and it's going to be an infinite amount of information for you to digest, just to determine if this drone strike is appropriate. Now go back to you being the victim. How many of these questions are you concerned with? None, right? You don't care at all about all this infinite process, all the paperwork, the thousands of meetings, the hearings, and all of that. The only thing you care about is that might hit me. I'm going to look at, 338 Tappan Street, 10 o'clock, I'm out of here. So in very little time, you've understood all the information you need as a special interest because you're a special interest. I would argue that all legislation works this way. Okay, so remember, if we're going to regulate the banks, who are going to be the people who understand that best?
The bankers.
The bankers. They're going to know immediately if the things you're trying to impose on the bank are going to hurt them or not. You think they're going to tell you if it's not going to hurt them? Oh, they're going to run bylaw 5637, which means we get richer, right? And all the constituents have to understand this very technical thing, right? If we're going to regulate microwaves, poor constituent now has to understand a microwave and understand the dangers it might provide to their kids and all these things. But if you're a microwave manufacturer, well, that's really not going to harm our bottom line at all, or that's going to harm our bottom line enormously. They're going to know in seconds. So special interests understand legislation immediately. Only the victim. Say you're the victim who's being involved in the drone strike. Do you care about banking legislation? No, you just want to get out. Are you worried about what's happening with microwaves? Are you worried about what's happening with the environment? Are you worried about all these other things? You are a special interest. You are a unique interest. In 5 seconds, you look at all of the transparent legislation and you see all the information you need to keep yourself alive. Whereas the poor constituent would have to spend maybe a lifetime just answering the moral questions of a drone strike, and then move over to banking, and then move over to microwaves, then move over to education, and then move to all these other things. These are all infinite questions. Can anyone tell me precisely that the Department of the Interior should be funded with $322 million? Does that go right down to the final stable? Can anyone tell me the difference between $322 million and $120 million? That's a pretty big difference. But there's no way for the constituent to even be able to determine the difference on that information without spending maybe their entire life just on that one single number. And if you look at the budget, there are tens of thousands of numbers. There's $1.6 billion for Iraqi train development. Is that appropriate? Should we be spending 4 times about on that than on the Department of the Interior? These are possible numbers. What are we spending on the drone strike? Should we be spending more? Should we be spending less? There are no answers for any of these. These will all take an infinite amount of time. Special interest, again, gets it right away. So, again, I believe that all legislation is similar to a drone strike. And no one questions drone strike. Oh, that should be secret, right? Because then the guys will know and they'll run. Well, think about banks as tackling the national interest, taking on the national interest, right? Taking on individuals. And when we see the rise in inequality, we see the correlation between transparency and the rise in finance, the finance institutions. So, the title of this is Weaponized Transparency. I'm going to tell a story about how transparency gets weaponized, and it is so deadly and so debilitating that this drives what we think is most of the amending process in Congress today. And I want you to, so you imagine you're a victim of a drone strike. I want you to imagine you just won public office for the first time, okay? And you've maybe spent your whole life running for office, and you've got 3 or 4 things that you really pushed and resonated with the people. And now you land in Washington, D.C. as a new legislator. And your first day in office, say the things that matter to you are, more parking spaces, more spaghetti, and I don't know, and what? And protecting yourself from drone strikes, right? Okay, so you've got more spaghetti, more parking spaces, protecting yourself. These are the things that you ran on, that resonated with your constituents, that got you into office. Okay, and you're really excited, you've tried your whole life, and we're going to claim that you're the most ideal legislator, the one we wished were in Congress. Right? These people, right? Almost all the other solutions you see were like, oh, the congressmen are so bad, get all those bums out, put in really good people, right? I'm actually kind of the view that they're okay, but these things that I'm about to talk to you about are corrupting the system, and they're unavoidable, even though you're an ideal legislator. So how can you corrupt an ideal legislator who's not willing to take a penny to do anything corrupt? And by the way, the NRA gives about $10,000 at the most per year to a legislator. Would $10,000 change any of your minds on gun legislation?
No.
It just seems small, doesn't it? Right? Are these people really that pathetic, the ones who are sending it to Washington?
Yes.
I would claim that it's more about you're about to hear. So you've won office, you walk in on your first day, and you realize that you want more parking spaces, more spaghetti, and protect yourself from drone strikes. And the first thing you've got to do is make sure that the things you have worked on get voted on in Congress. They need to somehow make it to the floor to have a vote. How do you do that? Well, the rules in the House are the Speaker decides the agenda. The agenda is a very powerful tool. Very powerful tool. If your things don't make it to the calendar, let me tell you, they ain't becoming law. Right? So it has to be on the calendar. If it doesn't get voted on, it doesn't become law. Hello, Mr. Speaker. Hey, how are you? You had a great, you ran great out of Brookline. Oh, that's great. You want more spaghetti, more of this, that, more of the other things, right? I saw you ran a great thing. Yeah, I really need to get those voted on. You're new here, aren't you? Oh, you want to get those voted on? That's so cute. Oh my God, so happy to have you. Oh my God. Let me tell you, you see my calendar over there? It's full. How long is it full for? Well, you're here 2 years, it's full for about 3 years. Excuse me, I just ran like crazy. I knew when I made it, I could finally turn government around and make the world perfect, right? And you're telling me the calendar's full, I won't get any of this stuff. Okay. I'll tell you what though, I really liked how you ran, really liked it. I'll give you a break. You come talk to me in 2 months. So you're like, okay, well, what do I do for 2 months? Well, go out and vote, go do things congressmen do, right? Congress people do. So you go every day, someone's proposing some bill, you make a vote, you're the honest one, right? You're the good one. You read all the bills, as I said, very hard to read, right? You gotta read all the stuff on drone strikes, all the stuff on regulators, all the stuff on this. It's an infinite amount of stuff. When I say infinite, it is. The Commerce Committee, since 1950, has published 1 million pages of hearings. They're one of 20 committees. All laws are based on the old stuff as well. And no law has the stuff from the hearings, right? Laws are like indexes, right? We're going to pay this amount of this. You've got to read 1 million pages per committee. It's 20, 40, about 40 committees. So about 40 million pages that you're responsible for. And that's just the hearings. So anyways, so you go out, you start voting, you're reading everything like crazy. People are talking. Remember, hearings are full of errors, mistakes, and bias. We like to think of hearings as like, well, technically, the sun is 4 billion X miles away from the earth and blah, 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 and it's all perfect. No, they're going, every warm-blooded American knows the sun's not too far from the earth and we need to get it closer by doing this, and everybody wants us to go out there and fly our new Honda Civics into the moon or something. You know, it's just bias, whatever they're saying. So you read these hearings and you're like, I don't believe any of that. You know, I'm a warm-blooded American, but it's not for me. So remember, we like to think of the congressional record as sacrosanct, like some great thing, but please read it. You know, show me where the good stuff is, because it's hard to find. So you're there, you're voting like crazy, right? And you start voting, well, guess what? Since 1970, your votes on all amendments are broadcast onto this big board. So I'm James D'Angelo, I vote, green. Oh, green, next to my name, great, I voted positive, right? Don't like that, boom, red, next to my name, great. So you go back to the Speaker. The Speaker's like, my God, I've never been so impressed with a new legislator in my life. Oh my God, I saw you out there every day reading like crazy. You were voting like crazy, you did all those wonderful things. And you're like, yes, but I need more parking, more spaghetti, and fewer drone strikes. Oh my God, let me tell you, oh, wait. Oh, well, isn't that remarkable? Oh my God. You know, all your votes that you voted on, well, they get popped into my computer right here. And I just noticed something funny. You voted 78% of the time against the way I vote. 78% of the time. You must really not like me.
You know, someone just walked out of the office, wants 3 things on the calendar, they vote 84% of the time with me. Now, I'm not going to say anything more about this, but maybe we talk in a couple months. There's no overt threat there, but you know exactly what he's saying, right? He's saying that if you want the things that you care about to be voted on by the US Congress, you need to start aligning your votes with his, or if it's a she, with hers. And if you don't, those things will not make it on the calendar. So you now have a choice. And what's that choice? Do the 3 or 4 things that really matter to you and sell out everything else. Or vote the way you want on all these things where you're 1 in 435 and accomplish nothing and probably not get reelected. And let me tell you, neither of those decisions are good. You're the ideal congressperson who's just come to change Congress. And what's just happened to you? You are sinking through the floor. You are already in trouble. Now imagine if the speaker cannot look at how you voted. What is the speaker going to do? Cannot say for certain that anybody voted their way or not. They just know the votes aren't going well their way or whatever. What that's called when the speaker can't watch your votes and you get to vote the way you want, that's called democracy. I don't know if you guys have heard some of that, but that would apply in Congress even, where each person has equal power, each person has an individual vote, and not one person taking control of the entire vote. And guess what? The speaker's not the only one who's going to make that deal with you. If you're in the minority, your minority leader's going to do that to you. Right? Your minority whip is going to do that to you. Okay? The president is going to do that to you. Oh, you want the funding for that bridge back in your district? You want the new meters? I'm the executor. I write the check. And I've noticed that you're 68% of the time against me. Doesn't even need to say it now because we know exactly what that means. Right? These threats are implied, they don't have to be spoken, and they really exist. Which is why you get, as soon as you open the vote, you get this weird thing called partisanship. You have to align your votes to leaders and power. And you can no longer do your ideal congressman game. You're screwed from day one. Which is why when you yell at congressmen and go, oh, you guys are all corrupt, they're like, yeah, sorry. Because they know they're making these terrible decisions. They're feeling it, they're really hurting inside, right? Again, I sympathize with these poor people. And back in the day, you didn't have to do that. Right? You talk to the president would be like, oh, I'm not going to give you something you're just, you're going to pass it. You close the curtain, be like, sorry, guy. Right? That's the way the secret ballot works. Heartbreak on day 1 in office. One more story. Oh, go ahead.
I thought you might be interested in, Barney Frank once said, the only time I got to vote for the perfect candidate was when I ran for the first time. The second time I had a few problems with my record.
It's absolutely true. He's one of the most vocal on this, right? He said, I was the perfect congressman for a few months. And let me tell you, because he had that discussion. So he's great about that. And he talks about using intimidation. There's a video of him using that intimidation because he became very powerful to jam it to other people. Right? And he said, oh, you got to use it. And of course you do, because if the Democrats don't use it and the Republicans do, well, guess who wins? So you have no choice. So it's an arms race. So we'd like to say, oh, these guys are bad for abusing these guys, but if you don't do it, you're not serving your people. Because if you're a Republican and you really care about your things, or your people really care about you, you need to do it just as much as they do. So the Republicans aren't bad here. Democrats aren't bad. The Speaker's not bad. They're responding to the realistic pressures that exist. But you can take all those pressures away in 2 seconds, right? By returning this back. Weaponized transparency is even further than this. As I say, all transparency can be weaponized, and you're starting to hear about this, right? You know, we see the special interest of you of the drone strike, where transparency really helps you avoid any sort of damage to you. And yet, by the time you learn the system, you might be able to tweak some of the agenda to maybe get the drone strike going on someone else, because you become a specialty at this, right? You're the person who knows best how to treat drone strike information. Weaponized transparency also works like this, okay? And this is another real story, and this might account for 90% of the current amending process, both in the state level, local level, and at the feds. Again, you've just walked into Congress, but you just beat someone. So you had this nice little tight race, right? And you beat this person who you didn't like at all. And you win, and you're just like, oh good, I'm free, right? I'm good. That person over there has likely got friends in Congress. And they don't have to be powerful friends at all. But they know now that all your votes are public. And you likely have to vote on everything. And what they're going to do is they're going to find out the things that really mess up your constituents. So issues that you didn't have to run on, issues that weren't a big deal at all. Say there was something with a new school in Brookline going up that takes your really wonderful constituency and divides them down the middle. He's going to start writing amendments. Your enemy in Congress, who wants his buddy back in, now starts writing amendments called gotcha amendments. All right, these gotcha amendments are, well, we're going to look at defunding the public school in Brookline. He doesn't even care. He doesn't have to do any research. We're going to look at funding it. He doesn't care if it's good or bad for that school in Brookline, right? He's just going to write it, and now you're going to have to vote on it. What does that do? That divides your constituents in half. Say you have an issue with gambling in your town or something where some of them want new jobs, other people really hate gambling really bad. He's going to write another one. He's going to keep finding issues that might be problematic. He doesn't even have to be sure if they're problematic. He doesn't even have to do his research. He's going to write all these amendments at you. Wait, I thought he's supposed to write amendments for the good of the people. I thought we're supposed to be spending all our time working on legislation that's important. Well, as soon as you realize that they're writing these gotcha amendments at you, what do? I'm going to write some back at you. And what we saw is from as soon as they opened it up, the amending process went haywire. It went from 200 a year to 1,800. That's all crap. Not all. It's a lot of crap. That's all time that your legislators, because if I'm having a war with you, Connor over here doesn't know this. He's reading these amendments. He's trying to do the good thing. He's reading all this funding it. Who cares? What the? I've got to read this. Oh my God, I'm losing all my time. I'm writing all these amendments. I never knew there were so many amendments. What, gambling? What? We're federal, it's state? What? I've got to vote on this. You're spending all your time trying to resolve a war that you don't know exists. And again, this is the vast majority of the amending process in Congress. As soon as you turn it off, can I write a gotcha amendment at him? Pointless. Because it's not going to call him out. And when I write 10 gotcha amendments against him, in 2 years, I call him my buddy and I go, he's voted on all these things this way, take him out in the election. Show that to his constituents. And all the constituents are there, oh, transparency, oh my God, my congressperson, he's such, I thought he would be great. It was really terrible. He didn't get anything done because we didn't get meter spaghetti or less drone strikes. And he's got all this, I didn't know he had such a sordid history. And that's all you see in the congressional record. All that voting, either pushed by the speaker or about stuff that doesn't matter. I'm thinking I might stop there. Anyone feels like asking about the NRA, tell a great story about the NRA.